I kind of sit on two ends of this. I'm both a mitochondrial disease participant, community member, and I'm also acting as a psychologist in the professional space, managing chronic illnesses. So I am going to go through a few things just to touch on how we can continue our days living with mitochondrial disease or supporting somebody with mito, and also how we can try and improve our quality of life. For me, that's really the key on my journey of mito, is really trying to fall back on ensuring that I'm living the best life I can with what I've got. So in terms of me thinking about my day, it can be really, really challenging in that I'm just trying to take care of the real basics. I'm trying to make sure that I'm taking the medication I need to take. I'm looking after myself in the most basic format, and that's making sure I can have a shower, I can get dressed, I can perform the real basic things by running the household financially, or just doing the basic chores, feeding the dogs, for example. The real key things that need to happen in the day. Unfortunately, there's so much that goes wrong. I found that I have a lot of other symptoms that involve a lot of management in the day. So I, for example, wear hearing aids. All of a sudden, that packs up out of nowhere, and I can't hear. I'm completely lost. And of course, you fail to think that you need 2 weeks repair services involved in that. So how do you cope with 2 weeks of not being able to hear? Diabetes, you need management of medication. All of a sudden, you run out of needles, or you haven't planned for the insulin, or you miss a dose. Of course, your sugars go all over the place. All these things that you can't always plan for and become really stressful in your everyday situations. So you're constantly managing pain, your energy levels. There's a sense of isolation, particularly with COVID, where you're not always able to access the carers that come in and support you, not able to access work and social engagement. There's so many things that begin to disrupt our everyday situations. And so I go back to thinking about a few things when I feel really overwhelmed. And I think of, how do I put myself in the best position for tomorrow? How much energy am I wasting on things I can't control? And how much energy I can use to focus on maintaining my day and sustaining the energy that I have? And if there's so much that's out of my control, how do I improve my quality of life for today and for tomorrow? What is going to give me positive energy as opposed to exhausting myself on things I can't control? So sometimes I think about it and I think, oh, I probably should be doing more. I should be doing more housework. I should be doing more work. I should be active with the dogs. I should be doing exercise. And I kind of fall back and say, you know what? It's okay to put myself first. It's okay to take time out. It's okay to ask for help. And it's okay to let go of the things that are not a priority, things that I feel I should do. Housework, washing, laundry, that's all going to happen tomorrow again. So how much do I focus on using my energy for the things that are probably not critical in my daily life? So I tend to fall back on what components are important to make sure that I'm improving my quality of life. And I often come across people in the community that find that they are so restricted or limited in a lot of things. What do they do next? Where do they go from being at the bottom? How do you get up? And so I fall back on this diagram because I really want to think about what components of my quality of life can I spend more time on. And so I talk a little bit about emotional well-being. How can I let go of the things that I can't control that are really impacting me emotionally? And that's a real challenge with this disease, I think. Also considering personal development. What can I do for myself that I'm going to feel I'm achieving in? What goal can I set for today? And then social inclusion. Is there someone I can call up, have a chat to? Is it just that you post something on the Mito community website and ask for some support. Is it that you phone the Mito Foundation and talk to them? You have a friend, you have somebody in the community that you can just engage with. Social inclusion can also just be about getting out in the community and just sitting on the beach if you can get there, or finding a location where you can just engage in watching people or just taking that time out. We also talk about self-determination, and again, that's really a challenge. And I think that that's something that we talked about in previous presentations, is really about how much we're able to keep pushing through. And that's not always possible when we talk about the medical field and how many people don't understand mitochondrial disease. So how much are we able to push ourselves through and advocate for ourselves? And when do we need to pull back and just focus on repair and recovery? Then I look at physical well-being. That's a real challenge for me because everyone says exercise is great for you and improves your mitochondria, which it, I imagine, does. But sometimes I find that that's a real challenge for me, where I just don't have the energy to do the physical engagement. And so I have to consider what other components I can do that are going to make me feel useful in the day. And that's where I might use that social inclusion, emotional well-being. I just try and focus on the things I can do in the day that is going to improve my quality of life. And then, of course, the last one is your rights and your relationships. That's really about making sure that you keep in mind that you are still a human being. Doesn't matter what disability you have. You have the rights just like anybody else. You have the rights to communicate your needs. You have the rights to equality, to dignity, and those are things that you need to keep in mind when you're ensuring that you live your best life. So in terms of our brains, because obviously I'm focusing on the psychological components of things, and I've learned over the past few months just how important our brains play a part in our bodies, because I think we often focus on the exercise, we focus on the physical needs, the symptoms that we have physically, but we forget that our brain uses 20% of our body's energy. And it really functions a lot in the background. So if we're not looking after our brain, it means that we are really vulnerable to our environment, and especially this disease, because our brain is constantly functioning. Even when we're sleeping, it's constantly vigilant about anything that's happening in our environment. So we are always using that energy. It doesn't have that capacity to store energy like some of our muscles do. So it's constantly working. And if you're not taking care of what's happening in your brain, you're using that energy constantly and you get overwhelmed. And that's where, if you're doing things, really complex tasks, or you're focusing on a stressful situation, your energy increases, your demand increases. And that's where I'm going to refer to mindfulness later on. I'm sure that you are quite aware of the term. It's a lot harder than it sounds, to be honest. It's taken me a long time to get my head around it. But if I look at the facts around mindfulness and how it impacts the brain, mindfulness is really a concept that means that you are letting the ideas and the information and the thoughts come into your head, but you're allowing yourself to let them go. You're allowing yourself to say, well, I don't have any control right now over this. I can't put my energy into this. I'm going to let it go. I'm going to park it. And that means that you are reducing the stress in your head, really. And that could be in a format of writing something down. It could be in a format of just speaking to someone about it, something that just gets it out of your head and lets it go. And there's been factual information to say that it reduces the gray matter in your amygdala, which is a response center in your brain that looks at your stress levels. It also increases your activity in your prefrontal cortex, which is the front part of your brain responsible for planning, organization, and problem solving. So it's actually increasing that activity and that capacity to be able to solve problems a little bit better. And of course, that would result in some improvement of quality of life, and that you are focusing on the things that you can control, the things that you enjoy, and the things that reduce stress. So what I've been told lately by specialists, and it's kind of finally hit me, is that I'm finding that my energy demand is not meeting my energy supply, in that my body is not producing enough energy to be meeting the demands that I'm putting on myself. And that's something really important for me, because it means that I need to pull back on certain areas. And I think when you look at things, you look at what is stressing you out the most. Is it financial? Is it toxic relationships? Is it work-wise? What things are you going to think smarter about? What things are you going to be able to reduce the stress about? Because really that will mean that you are placing less energy demand on your body, and you're able to supply your own body's needs. So I had a brief look at how we can reduce stress. And we often say this, everybody's familiar with stress and how it impacts you, but I don't think we often take time to think about it. But what uses our stress is when we make mistakes, when we're sensitive to light, to sound, to busyness in the world, when we are doing all these daily living skills that require a lot of energy, when we're feeling really emotional, we're sensitive to people's moods and their responses to us. There's also perceived injustice, I think, which is huge in the medical system, because we feel like people aren't listening to us, that we're being a burden on others. And then obviously any change that takes place in our world can be really disruptive. When we talk about how we can create energy, positive energy, how we can spend our time on things that we enjoy and improve our quality of life, we talk about focusing on areas of interest. We talk about any activities that we enjoy, whether it be arts or crafts or reading a book. Anything that's enjoyable requires less energy, because you're not having to concentrate as hard if it's something that you're interested in. It might also be animals and nature, very therapeutic, and there's a lot of research done in animal therapy as well. Meditation, as I've said, mindfulness is a good option for you. Sleep, recovery, where you're not exhausting other parts of your body. While your brain might still be ticking away, you're not using your body for a lot of other things. You're not having to eat and digest that food. You're not having to use your muscles. So sleep is a really positive thing, as well as rest. And then, of course, certain people. I think you'll find if you have a good conversation with a friend and you end up laughing, it's therapeutic. It's a really positive experience. So try and spend your energy on those things that are not as crucial and cognitively demanding as other tasks. And then in terms of how you care for your mind, we mentioned this in previous wellbeing calls, but really if you just offload on someone, if you have a partner or a friend, if you talk to your dog, just getting it out of your head is really useful. I've also found that writing things down, again, getting them out of my head, trying to be organized in certain ways, writing things on a calendar, ordering your medication in bulk so that you don't run out, having records of medical information, again, not having all of that in your head to try and remember, putting it down on paper, putting it in a recorded system, writing it down. I find if I have a GP appointment or specialist appointment, I have all these thoughts racing in my head. By the time I get to the appointment, I've completely forgotten them. And I'm really frustrated with myself that I've not even taken down a note. So what I do now is keep notes on my phone. Every time I think of something before the appointment, I'll make a note of it so that I've got 3 or 4 questions to go in with. And it's out of my head. I don't have to be consuming my time thinking about what I've forgotten. So try and use those things to compensate for the memory aspect and relieve your mind. It's also useful to have someone just to check in with. Again, if you do have a partner or friend, to say, this is what's going on for me. Often they'll say, well, this was happening 3 years ago. I don't think it's gotten any worse. So it's not as bad as you might think if you're just doing a bit of a reality check and a rational conversation. As I mentioned, reducing stress is where possible. Environmental changes are great if you're able to get an occupational therapist involved. Is there anything that will reduce your energy, save your energy so that it makes your life a little bit easier? And then mindfulness, I talked about looking at things you can control, things you can't, what it is that you wanting to fight for, what it is that you're able to let go of and move on with. And then obviously establishing a strong clinical team, I find is really useful because that reduces your need to repeat your information to people. And again, just alleviates what's in your head so you can focus on the things you enjoy in life and reflect back on that quality of life diagram, what it is that you can be spending more time on that you enjoy. And then obviously the most important part is that if you are going through a really bad time, having a bit of a flare up, looking after yourself, taking time to recover, because if you're not doing it today, you're not going to be here next week. And it gets to that point where you really are so exhausted, you keep leading from behind and you never get ahead. I just wanted to really sum up with this diagram because there is a lot of information that I go through in the slides, and I always try and provide that afterwards just to process. But I found that this is a really useful visual in terms of how we let our minds get really cluttered. And I've found that this is something that I need to work on myself. I caught myself having a conversation with my partner the other day, and I just started rambling on, and I realized that I talked so quickly and about so much in a matter of 5 minutes. And he was so overwhelmed that he just had to pull me back and say, well, what is the first issue that you need to address? And I think it was a clear demonstration to me that I do let my mind get really carried away. And if I'm using all that energy to think about so much, I'm not achieving anything. And I can't decide on anything, and I can't move forward until I clear and declutter my brain. So we talk about whether your mind is full or whether you're mindful, whether you're able to really think about what it is that's going on inside your head, whether it's related to your mitochondrial disease, your symptoms, or whether it's just life in general that you're letting dominate you and potentially progress your disease. So I really thought this was a good visual to try and be mindful of ourselves as opposed to letting our minds get too full.